I'm a boomer. I fully recognize that America is in an existential war for survival against third world invasion. You don't have to convince me, including legal, visa sponsored invasion. And even I do not give a shit about all these visa categories. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to have to learn about the difference between H1, F1, opt, O1. I don't care. The message, the pro-American message, shouldn't be H1 is bad, but this one is good. They're all bad. They are all bad. It must all end. No visas, period. No H1B, no F1, no opt, no O1, no work visa, no student visa, no tourist visa, absent a big security deposit. All the visas must end. None of them are in America's national interest. All the third world migrants must stay home. That is the starting negotiating point. Do that for a decade, and then we can readjust from there. All right, let's talk about the Overton window shift. The Overton window shift on immigration. I'm going to provide kind of a summary of my view. So what I've seen happening is the politically accepted, the within the Overton window, right? The Overton window is what is socially acceptable political opinion. But the whole point of the concept of the Overton window is that the window can shift, right? So things within the window are what's socially acceptable. You can say them at a cocktail party to a stranger and not worry that anyone's going to freak out, right? It's in the norm of political opinion. It's not going to get you in trouble. Stuff outside the Overton window is stuff that could potentially get you in trouble. People will start, giving you side eye. Like how could you even say that? That's crazy. And what I see is the Overton window shifting in a pro-America favor and contrary to the interest of third world migrants, which is, the Overton window, in my view, should be, the American Overton window should be squarely aligned with America's national interest, not with the interest of third world migrants. And what I see the transition being is it was not very long ago, even illegal migrants were okay. Why do you hate people who came to America for a better life? If you were stuck in Haiti with your family, wouldn't you try to get to the U.S. for a better life for you and your wife and your kids? It's just the morally right thing to do, even if it's against the law, right? So even being an illegal migrant was morally justifiable. And by the way, it is morally justifiable for the migrant. It is true that if I were in Haiti with my wife and kids, I would try to break into the U.S. too. But that's not the political question for an American, or ought not be. The political question ought to be, but is that in America's national interest? Is it moral for America to allow those people in and let them stay, to have just be okay with being invaded by the third world? And remember, on this show, morality is not just personal preference. Morality is anchored to biology, to evolutionary biology. Moral conduct is conduct that's consistent with the interests of your own genetic line, your family, your community, your tribe, your nation. Because we live in a hostile world of scarce resources and everyone's fighting for their piece. And if you let someone else take your pieces, you, your family, your community, your tribe, your nation do not have those resources anymore. So it's not in their interest to lose those resources. Life doesn't get it easier when you have fewer resources. So every decision that's made, if it's going to be filtered through a moral lens, the question should be, is this decision, is this action one that's consistent with advancing the interest of myself, my family, my community, my tribe, my nation? That's why drug addiction is immoral. It's not immoral because it's icky. It's immoral because if you're a drug addict, you can't productively contribute to the advancement of yourself, your family, your community, your tribe, your nation. Well, when we perhaps the worst kind of immorality is worse even than drug addiction and being non-productive in that isolated sense, is to prioritize the interest of others, not just outside your family, not just outside your community, not just outside your tribe, outside your nation, outside your entire cultural foundations, the third world, to prioritize their interest over your own. Illegals coming in obviously break our laws. They have no respect for our sovereignty. They consume scarce American resources like housing, education, healthcare, employment, all of that illegally. Clearly, they need to be removed. But the Overton window was, hey, they're just here for a better life. We just have to accept them. Well, the Overton window shifted. Now people are saying, nope, these illegals, The illegals have to go. Alligator, Alcatraz. The illegals have to go. Mass deportations. We're tired of there being 90 million illegal migrants in our country. So the Overton window is shifted against the interest of illegals and for the interest of Americans. America's national interest. But what about legal migrants? Aren't they okay? They're still okay, right? That's still inside. All the legal migrants. They follow the rules, H-1B, O-1, student visas, work visas, tourist visas. Surely legal immigrants are okay. Now the Overton window is shifting there too. You know what? Even if they were following all the rules, which they're not, the legal immigration pipeline into America is thoroughly corrupted. There's a reason 85% of H-1Bs come from India, one nation. Thoroughly corrupt. So it's not being legitimately operated. It's a corrupt system. But even if it were being legitimately operated, it's a rational question to ask, how is it in America's national interest to import millions of people from the third world hellhole that is India? Does that make America more America? I don't think so. I think it makes America more like India. They don't assimilate. There's no way to assimilate tens of millions of people coming into the U.S. in a brief span of time when they're so culturally dissimilar from Americans. These are not Germans or Irish or Italians coming in with a similar European heritage and religious faith. These are literally third world savages. If they were so awesome, why does India look like India? So now the Overton window is moving. No, we got to stop all the migration. At least my position is the third world migration. If people want to migrate to America and they have skills we actually need and they have resources and they can contribute, I don't want a bunch of blind people coming here. Why should I do that? But if they can come here and they have a similar cultural heritage as the founders, as America, if they're coming from Europe, if they're coming, they're the white South Africans. I don't have a big problem with that. Australians, if they are capable of culturally assimilating, and even then only in tiny numbers and with exceptional skills. But anybody from the third world, that's just a no-go. And that's where we're seeing the Overton window shift. And that's happened in months. That has happened in just months. MG Law says they should come from a high trust society. I think that's just synonymous with saying, basically a Western civilization. But high trust is broader. I see room for that. I don't, for example, Japan is culturally a high trust society. I'm not sure we need, would we bring in 10 million Japanese people and drop them in one city? Would they really assimilate? Maybe. They might. We have a lot of Japanese Americans. We have for a long time. But it's not as clear a case of obvious assimilation as if they were, German, British, even better, right? Bunch of British patriots. They see their nation dying. So I have a bunch of tabs here on this Overton window shifting. I just found it really interesting. That's what I wanted to share with all of you. Here is bonus content. Let me make this a bit bigger. This guy had actually a pretty interesting thread, so I'll look at a few of his. The emissary. I don't know who this is. I just found it interesting. There's a churn happening in American society surrounding one of its most successful minorities, Indian Americans. That's part of the Overton window, true, right? Hey, the Indians, aren't they the smart ones? Shouldn't we let them in? Aren't they the overperformers? It's all a lie. All their credentials are fake. They can't actually do anything. They get hired through ethno-fascism. But there's a churn. Things are moving against Indian Americans. Gas station owners and Dunkin' Donut clerks are now transitioning into tech CEOs and politicians at an alarming rate, and a backlash is forming. He says, I'll preface this by saying an overwhelming amount of Americans seem to either admire or pay no special mind to Indian Americans. And I agree. I think that has been the case. That's changing now. But why was that the case? Because we were aware of only the tiny minority that were overperformers. And some exist. And they did good work. And if those are the only ones you know about, it's like, well, all the Indians I know about are super smart. We should have those people here. They were only seeing the very tip of the iceberg. They weren't seeing the bottom of the iceberg. The far right cannot fathom how a country with an average of 82 IQ, that's India, 82, is pumping out people who are now their bosses and in leadership positions. The image of India is of a subhuman folk shitting in the streets, worshiping animals, using pejoratives towards heathen brown folks. But all of that is true. That is India. And the reason we can't accept this nation with an 82 IQ taking over our leadership positions is because they're not doing it legitimately. Their credentials are faked. Their CVs are faked. They're getting hired by their relatives. We see company after company. They get a couple of Indians in human resources and the whole company becomes Indian. They don't hire Americans because Americans are not Indians. It's ethno-fascism. So they're not achieving success on merit. They're turning America into more of India. So this guy, if it's not clear, he's pro-Indian. He's probably an Indian, actually, just hiding behind his handle. Here he sarcastically writes, well, Charlie Kirk says, America does not need more visas for people from India. Perhaps no form of legal immigration has so displaced American workers as those from India. And there's millions of them in America taking jobs from Americans. Enough already. We're full. Let's finally put some of our own people first. And this account responds, oh, look how silly Charlie Kirk is. Indians are simultaneously low IQ, but replacing the elites. They're simultaneously incompetent subhumans, but taking your job. They're simultaneously flooding the country, but ultra selected. They're simultaneously castists, but also ethnic nepotists. This is Schrodinger's Indian. It's a reference, of course, to Schrodinger's cat. Schrodinger was a physicist who postulated that if you had a cat in a box, you could either know the cat was in the box or know if it was living or dead, but not both, I believe is how it goes. The idea is that if you have a particle around an atom, you can either know the location of the particle or the velocity of the particle, but not both. So I'm not a physicist. I'm just summarizing my vague recollection. So he's saying, look at all these contrasts. It's Schrodinger. You can know either one or the other. But of course, this gives away the lie. They're not low IQ. They are low IQ. And they're not becoming elites on merit. They are largely incompetent. And they're taking the job through theft. They are flooding the country because they're not being carefully selected. And they are a caste society. But the lowest member of their caste is in their eyes superior to the highest level American. All these things are in fact simultaneously true. And what part of what's going on, and MG Law mentioned the need for, migrants should come from a high trust society. India is a low trust society. That's why Indians are so commonly scammers. You can't trust anything they say. They're always cheating about their credentials, about their background, about their skill sets. They would consider it stupid to not lie about those things. That's what a low trust society does. You lie, cheat, and steal for the benefit, and that's moral behavior in a low trust society. You lie, cheat, and steal for the benefit of your family, community, tribe. Snarf says, but any race can do this. Any race could, right? This is a choice. This is not how Americans operate as a society. It's just not. It's just not. Sure, can you find nepotism here and there? Sure, but it's not a core principle of American society that's applied everywhere. So I just note here, it's always been the case that high trust, first world societies are readily subject to invasive abuse by low trust, third world invaders. Folks, it's like we've all driven around the countryside at one point or another, right? And you go past a little farm and they'll have a table or they'll have a shed. And there's a bunch of corn and tomatoes and cucumbers and melons in the shed for sale. And there's nobody manning the shed. They have a little sign up that gives the price for the items, and they have a box you can put the money in. And there's not much to keep anyone from stealing the money out of the box, much less taking the produce and not paying for it. In a high trust society, that works. In a low trust society, they rob you blind. They think they'd be an idiot not to just steal all this stuff. That's the difference between a high trust and a low trust society. In a high trust society, your kid can ride his bike to the convenience store and lean it against the wall and go inside and buy a candy bar and have some expectation the bicycle will still be there, unlocked, when he comes back out. In a low trust society, the thieves figure out how to break every bike lock, so even having a lock becomes pointless. And whether your society is high trust or low trust, I was going to say it's a matter of choice. I don't really think low trust societies can become high trust, but I think high trust societies can be degraded into low trust societies. And that's what happens to America when you import tens of millions of low trust cultural third world migrants into a high trust society. They rob you blind. And that's what Indians do in our employment scheme through these H-1B and all the other visas. In a high trust society, we expect others. We presume that others will treat us the way we would treat them. We would pay for the food in the shed, for the produce in the shed. So we expect other people to do that too, with honesty and integrity. But Indians, third world migrants generally don't, that's not how they see the world. They don't operate that way. They're not a high trust society. They're a low trust society where everybody's cheating everybody else. The result of these third world Indians invading America is much like cholera bacterium invading a well. A little bit of cholera in even a healthy and powerful man, a little bit of India, in even a healthy and powerful society like America, that little bit of cholera will kill that man. He will shit himself to death in a matter of hours. That's how cholera kills. In fact, cholera-induced fatal defecation is a pretty good allegory for what India is doing to America with this invasion, in one man's view. Then you hear, by the way, X is flooded with these pro-India accounts issuing propaganda. They say, why is everyone mad about H-1Bs? H-1B is only about $65,000 a year. First of all, that's a lie. It's higher than that. In fact, I think I have a responding slide here. The 65,000 number is misleading. There are many visa programs, there a dozen or more, and many organizations hire outside H-1B. They use a different visa program. Even with H-1B, it's 85,000, and that doesn't include spouses. So they all bring their spouses, so that doubles the number to 170,000. Then those get flipped over into what are called STEM opt work visas. They get to stay for another 3 years. So they accumulate 85,000, 85,000, 85,000. Now it's 250,000. Then they get to bring in their extended family members, their parents, sisters, brothers, cousins, aunts, uncles, up to 15 or so. So multiply all this by 15, and that's only the H-1B visas. That's how we end up with tens of millions of these people, mostly not productive contributors to American society. The ones actually on the H-1B visa purport to have high-value skills that America needs. It's all faked. But certainly all the extended family they bring with them other than under H-1B are not here for that purpose. They're not required to show some particular expertise that America needs. There's simply the complexity of the H-1B process, right? Like this guy said, oh, H-1Bs are only 65,000. I mean, he's lying already. It's 85,000. But what he's not taking into consideration, or he's pretending doesn't exist, is all these synergistic effects with all these other visa programs that leads to this being tens of millions of people who never leave and change American society for the worse forever. So one piece of advice I shared was don't get drowned in the details of all these visas. H1, opt, F1. I'm a boomer. I fully recognize that America is in an existential war for survival against third world invasion. You don't have to convince me, including legal, visa-sponsored invasion. And even I do not give a shit about all these visa categories. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to have to learn about the difference between H1, F1, opt, O1. I don't care. The message, the pro-American message, shouldn't be H1 is bad, but this one is good. They're all bad. They are all bad. It must all end. No visas, period. No H-1B, no F-1, no opt, no O-1, no work visa, no student visa, no tourist visa, absent a big security deposit. All the visas must end. None of them are in America's national interest. All the third world migrants must stay home. That is the starting negotiating point. Do that for a decade, and then we can readjust from there.